From the Daily Catch, this is The Catch Up, and I'm Emily Sacker. This episode of The Catch Up is brought to you by Hudson Solar and Battery Solutions, your local experts in energy independence. In Red Hook, Rhinebeck, and across the Hudson Valley, Hudson Solar Solutions helps homeowners and small businesses become more resilient. The only way to truly lower your electric costs is to reduce what you use or generate your own power. Hudson Solar Solutions designs premium solar and battery systems built to do exactly that, safely and reliably. Visit hudsonsolarsolutions.com to see what energy independence looks like. And now, for more than 4 decades, Betty and Peter Olson have lived in the house they built together on a hill in Clinton, a life quite literally constructed nail by nail. Peter was the fixer, the engineer, the steady hand. Betty was the partner who carried shingles up ladders, asked for help, and laughed her way through it all. But in recent years, that long familiar balance has quietly reversed. Peter, now 84, is living with Alzheimer's, and Betty, at 82, has become his sole caregiver, managing medications, meals, daily routines, and the slow, heartbreaking loss of skills that wants to find her life partner. Their days are quieter, now shaped by repetition, patience, and moments of unexpected humor, including a Donald Duck voice that still makes an appearance at the most unlikely of times. Today, Betty joins us to talk about love, caregiving, resilience, and how to preserve your own life while walking alongside someone whose memory is slipping away. It's the week of March 9th. Welcome, brave Betty Olson, to the Catch Up.
Thank you.
So let's just start with your origin story with Peter. How did you meet? How did you fall in love?
Okay, well, it was the first marriage for both, but we were in our mid-30s when we got married. I had always planned to get married around 25, but I didn't find the right guy. And this was back in the 70s. There was no internet. There wasn't Harmony or Hinge or anything like that to meet people. And I never drank alcohol. And so I didn't hang out in bars. So it was really hard to meet people. And so Ann Landers always said, take courses. You could maybe find somebody. Dutchess County used to twice a year send out a thing called DACE, which I think stood for Dutchess Adult Continuing Ed. And so I always studied that very carefully, and I would go through it and circle everything that interested me. One was weaving, and the other one was scuba diving. So I thought, well, I'm interested in weaving, but I'm not going to meet guys there. So I took scuba. I was a rank beginner, and Peter had gotten his certification in scuba diving as a teenager, and he was a volunteer assistant to the official instructor of the course. It was at the Poughkeepsie YMCA, which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore. Anyway, Peter always tells people that he married me because I needed so much help. And the reason I needed so much help was I am an inveterate floater. They kept putting more weights on me and I still kept floating up. And so he had to hold me down on the pool floor for me to be able to pass the test, which I did. And I did get my certification. And
How did you go from that to a date?
Well, Peter was very shy, but one day we were walking out and he said, have you eaten yet? And I said, no. And he said, well, you plan to eat at home or someplace else? So I said, well, if you're asking me to come with you, I'd be happy to. I think it would have taken him several more questions to get there. And so we went to what used to be the Town and Country Diner in Hyde Park. It's now the Ever Ready Diner. And that was our first date. So our intellects were totally different. I went to Vassar, which at the time was all girls. I had a good liberal arts education, but I never knew how to do practical stuff. And that's what really impressed me about Peter. He could do everything that I couldn't do. The joke in our family was that we'd hire somebody to change a light bulb. And Peter built our house and he could fix everything in it. Even if it was something he had never done before, he always knew how to do it. So we really didn't have a lot in common, but it balanced. I could do everything he couldn't. I was the people person. He's not really good at communication. And I am not really good at dealing with inanimate objects at all.
I love that origin story of your relationship. What are some of your favorite memories? You built a family, right?
Yes.
Bring us inside your marriage and your relationship.
Okay, well, I was 16 days short of my 35th birthday when we finally got married. And I was very aware of my biological clock ticking. And it was in October. So I said to him, if you think you might ever want to marry me, I really need to know now because my biological clock is ticking. And I've always wanted a June wedding, and they'd book ahead way in advance. And so he said, well, you might as well book it. We could always cancel. So I booked it. So we didn't cancel. And if I hadn't said that, we'd probably still be dating.
Did you end up having the children you so badly wanted?
We only got one, and it wasn't easy. I ended up having a cesarean, and it wasn't good, but that's the way it was.
Okay. So tell us about those first moments when you felt that Peter's memory was a concern.
Well, it was rather sudden. When he was 68 years old, Peter was diagnosed with polycystic kidney disease. And for a long time, it was just being watched. And then finally, in July of 22, it was decided that he needed to go on dialysis. And at first, we were going to try home dialysis, but it did not work out for him. So he had to go on regular dialysis. At the time, every once in a while, the people at dialysis were sort of hinting that maybe he had some problems with his thinking. And I wasn't really noticing it that much because he has a very quirky personality. So now looking back, I think he was already showing signs. He had been on a waiting list for a kidney transplant, and he got the transplant on July 20th of 2023. And when he came home from that, he was actually in worse mental shape than he is now. At the time, the doctor said that it was not unusual he was 81, for an elderly person to have that kind of reaction to having major surgery under anesthesia for 5 hours. But after about a month, they decided that wasn't that caused the dementia, but it brought it to the forefront. From there on, it was very obvious.
Can you help our listeners understand, give us some specific examples?
Yes. Well, we have a huge organic vegetable garden, and we have a big freezer, and we always froze vegetables to have all winter long. We have a food saver. I would fill the bags and he'd seal the bags. And I never actually operated the food saver. So it was July when he couldn't operate this food saver. And then I tried it, and there was nothing wrong with it. He just didn't know how to do it. He couldn't do it. So that was one of the obvious things.
So was it a mechanical thing, Betty? He couldn't physically make the tool work? How did you catch on to the cognition aspect?
Because when I tried it, I said to him, oh, look, it works. And then I showed him what I did, and he couldn't do it. And actually, I just want to mention, everybody always talks about this as memory. And to me, that isn't the biggest thing. It's not memory so much as, at least in Peter's case, knowing how to do things. And here's the guy that was his forte all through his life. He knew how to do everything. He did all the wiring for our house. And when the inspector came, he said it was the best job he ever saw. He knew how to do everything. And now he didn't know how to do the food saver. He didn't know how to do the microwave, very simple things. Even if you very carefully give him very specific instructions, he cannot follow them. For example, I try to get him to help me any way he can, both because I could use the help, but also I want him to feel useful. So we have a queen size bed, big sheets and everything, and trying to put them away. So I just ask him, how when each person holds two corners and then you come together, and he can't do that. He can't figure that out. And a really dire example was this past summer, I had a major misfortune. I cut 3 of my fingers very badly. Suddenly, it was with a can opener. I was bleeding all over the place, and obviously I had to go to the urgent care. And at this point, he couldn't drive. So I had my hand wrapped in the towel, was totally soaked with blood, driving with one hand. And I grabbed a bag that I knew I had my insurance cards with. And I was able, when we got there, I was able to unzip it and get the thing out with one hand, but I couldn't re-zip it because you really need 2 hands to do that. So I asked him to zip it. And instead of doing what you need to do, he'd pull it apart. And even when I'm saying, no, you have to push it together, he couldn't follow that direction. And this was last July. And that's just an example of he cannot, if you say up, he goes down. If you say left, he goes right. At first, you think he's being obstinate because in the past, he would do that sometimes just to tease, but it's not. He doesn't get it.
So, Betty, how did you feel when you first told yourself, I've got a problem here? We have a problem. What was your reaction?
I do remember not too long after he came back from his transplant, and I found human feces on the floor of the bathroom. That's when I was like, what am I going to do? I remember saying it out loud, what am I going to do? Fortunately, he got over that part fairly soon. And I know that it's probably in our future. And I guess that's something that's hard for me to deal with. The other thing was in the beginning, he'd turn the burner on and walk away and leave it. Or one time he turned the water on in the sink and the drink overflowed all over. So they did refer us to occupational therapy, and we went there, and the occupational therapist made a couple of signs in big letters. One says, "Don't leave the burner on." Another sign near the sink, "Don't leave the water running." And so for a while, I was afraid to leave him alone because of that. But that hasn't happened for quite a long time now. We still have the signs there. And he also has really lost a lot of energy. So I do leave him alone now. I mean, I wouldn't go for a really long time, but I feel I can do that. Usually if I'm going for a couple of hours, when I come back, he's still sitting in the same chair, in the same position as when I left him.
So you feel actually that even though the cognition and the energy have reduced, that he's in a way safer because he's not apt to get up and get himself into trouble.
Right. Yeah. But the first couple of months, I really didn't dare leave him alone. And
I know, Betty, you mentioned as we started talking that Peter was the one who did everything and could do everything. What was his occupation when he was working?
he had gotten his ham radio license when he was a teenager, and that became his career. He went to Dutchess Community College, and while he was in college, he had a job at WEOK radio station. His mother actually saw an ad for New York Communications, which is still here in Poughkeepsie, and they do two-way radio systems for police and fire, and he got the job, and he was there for 45 years. And they gave him the title of chief engineer because he would actually design these complicated radio systems. And he was also a troubleshooter when something went wrong.
Yes. So I see you here in the studio smiling. Has it been all just easy peasy for you, or has there been disappointments?
I wouldn't say it's easy, but well, I was really a caregiver before the dementia part, starting with when we were trying to do the home dialysis, which was in the summer of 22. The pandemic really changed it because when you have had a transplant, you're on immunosuppressants. We both stopped working March 15th, 2020 because of the pandemic. And we have both been wearing masks anytime that we're in public inside someplace. So in the summertime, we can go out to eat. And so I think that's really, in a way, changed my life more because of worrying about the germs. I guess the reason I'm smiling, when he was diagnosed with the polycystic kidney disease at the age of 68, I never in a million years thought he'd still be here at the age of 84. So I thank every day for every day we have. I didn't think it was realistic to expect that. Both of us have lived longer than all four of our parents. So I consider every day a gift.
How do you, Betty, connect with Peter now? What are your mechanisms?
Well, he's not that far gone. We still have the same relationship. It's very gradually going away, but he still likes to joke a little. One of the major things that I have noticed getting a lot worse is his ability to come up with the words he wants, and his chin starts quivering. And then sometimes he says, I can't think of it anymore. I think one of the saddest things is he's still at the stage where he's very aware of his problems of thinking. The biggest difference in our relationship is that I'm showing him how to do things rather than the other way around.
How does that feel for you?
Well, it's both good and bad. The good part is I'm discovering I can do some things I never thought I could do. Like just a few weeks ago, I put air in my tires, and I had never done that. And people said, well, you didn't get married until you were 35. I said, yeah, but in those days, we had gas stations where you drove into the gas station, a guy came out, started cleaning your windshield, checked your tires, checked your oil. So I felt very proud of myself. I could put my own air in my tires. I'm feeling better about my abilities in one way, but I now have to do everything I always had to do and everything he always had to do. So it's kind of scary. Yeah.
Okay. Tell us about the Donald Duck story that we alluded to in our opening.
I'm not sure the origins of that because it existed before I met him, but that was one thing he liked to do quite a bit, to be funny, and everybody knew it was to be funny. But now it seems he reverts to that when he's under stress, because it especially comes out whenever we have doctor's appointments. that he'll use this Donald Duck voice. It's not instead of answering, it's how he answers. And so I guess one good thing about having the diagnosis of dementia is before I had that diagnosis for him, I used to be really embarrassed. And I'd say to him, this is not appropriate. And now that he's officially an Alzheimer's patient, it doesn't embarrass me anymore. So this one time, it was in December, he was having major back problems, and we went to a pain doctor, and they told me I didn't need to come in. They're doing the procedure. So when the nurse came out, wanted me to come in so she could tell me what to do afterwards. She came out and she said, "Is there a Daisy Duck here?" And I said, "That would be me." I really enjoy that story, and most people get a kick out of it. The other thing is, one of his major symptoms, which has gotten quite a bit worse, is having trouble dressing himself. And I don't think I've ever heard him say, "Please help me." But what he will say, which is pretty funny, he's talking to the item of clothing. And I'll come out and I'll say, "What's the matter?" And just the other day, he said, we might as well put these pants in the garbage. They just will not cooperate. And of course, the problem was he had it on backwards, and he was trying to put the same leg in. He already had one leg in, or one common one with the jacket. My jacket's acting up again, which means he can't put it on. It's kind of funny, but it's sad also. This is a guy that could do everything, and he can't get his jacket right.
So, Betty, when you look to the future, or do you look to the future?
I do, yes. And my biggest concern is financial. We did put away as much as we possibly could, and we were very hurt by the 2008, 2009 financial situation. I know that things are going to get worse, so I really worry about being able to afford help or even be able to find it. I feel strongly that I do not want him to go to a nursing home because I know I would rather be dead than be in a nursing home myself. So if I had to have help, I would want someone to come here, and it might take everything I have and more. So that's the scary thing.
Yeah. So before we say goodbye to each other today, what else would you want to share with our listeners? Any advice? Any thoughts?
Well, everybody's situation is different. I never even thought that he'd even still be here at 84. So I'm very thankful. So you have to look at what you're lucky. I feel like every day is
Betty, as you navigate this challenge, how do you take care of yourself?
Well, I try to make sure that I don't narrow my own life. The pandemic narrowed it already before this all happened. There were a lot of things lost. And as you can probably tell, I'm a very social person. I miss interaction and all that. I was determined not to drop my activities. And a lot of people look askance at the fact they said, "Oh, you leave him alone," And I said, well, I have to take care of myself. And I can't afford to have somebody with him every time I'm not home, which would really narrow my life. So I'm very active in my church. So that's really important. I sing in the choir there, and I also sing in Capella Festiva, which is a big choir. We do a lot of concerts, and that's very important to me. So I remember the first couple of months he was home, I had to leave early from rehearsals because he had to have his medications at a certain time, but we've got that worked out now. And that's our lifelong learning. And I'm on the curriculum committee for that. I proofread the catalog, and I volunteer as the coordinator for the admissions interviews, which alums do. The other major thing I'm taking care of is on February 24th, I'm going to have a shoulder replacement. And I actually had been scheduled to have that right when he got his transplant. And I had to cancel it because I had to take care of him. And it was just getting worse and worse. So that's one way I'm taking care of myself.
All right. Well, it's wonderful that you've stayed so engaged and taken care of yourself as well. Thank you, Betty, so much for coming on the show. Please keep us close. We really want to know how your journey continues.
Thank you for inviting me too. I enjoy it.
And as we wrap up, a big thank you to our sponsor, Hudson Solar and Battery Solutions. If you've been thinking about solar, especially after the last big power outages of winter, now's a good time to explore it. Visit hudsonsolarsolutions.com for more information. So that concludes the catch-up. Thanks to Maddie Rosenberg, Jen Hammoud, and Esther Martell at our partner Radio Free Rhinecliff for their help in producing this episode. We'll see you next time.